Good evening, guys. Thank you so much for coming tonight to the May 18, 2021 business meeting. We all could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. Thank you guys so much. We are joined by 6 of our trustees, our superintendent of schools, Dr. Timothy Harney, our assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, Dr. Ted Fulton, our assistant superintendent for finance and operations, Mr. Rich Snyder, our district legal counsel, Mr. Christopher Clayton, our district clerk, Ms. Suzanne Bonetti. Just want to say thank you so much for everything with the vote today. Truly appreciate everything you're doing. And our student rep, Mr. Robert Honey. Just a few announcements. There are 2 opportunities for the community to participate during the Board of Ed meeting. The first is just before the board takes up its agenda, and the second follows the disposition of all agenda items. If you'd like to speak, we ask that you please go to the podium and please state your name and where you live. The normal allotted time for individual speaker is approximately 3 minutes. For the convenience of the community, all Bayport Blue Point Board of Education meetings are taped and posted thereafter to the district website. And if you'd like to follow us on Twitter, you can follow us at BBP Schools or at BBP Soup. At this time, we would open it up to the community for any new or old business. Not hearing any, we will give it to our superintendent for a superintendent report. Dr. Harney, how are you tonight, sir?
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Miller. First of all, I would just like to thank everybody for coming out and voting today. As Mr. Miller alluded to, the polls will be closed at 9 p.m. So just thank you for everyone taking the time. We appreciate it. Just a couple of things. Recently in the news, you've heard things about CDC making recommendations. Typically, and that's why I wanted to send home the notice that I sent home on Friday, that typically what happens is the CDC makes their recommendations, and then even if you're following them, then they say that some of the exceptions are the local and the state governments kind of make their own adjustments if they're going to, or accept them, how are they going to do it. So typically what happens comes from the CDC, then New York State Department of Health takes a look at things, and then once they come out with their recommendations, then what happens after that, the Suffolk County Department of Health then usually follows up. So usually it takes a little bit of time. People may have heard our governor yesterday made an announcement that he was going to be accepting some of those CDC recommendations. He did talk about schools, but again, we did not see anything in writing yet, that schools would be still looking to use the mask. So that was something that I know people have asked about and talked about. So we're still waiting for the written information to come our way, but that's kind of where we are right now. And that's kind of the typical process. They have not really shared anything in regards to next year. You may have heard today that New Jersey put out their own statement about remote learning for next year, and they were moving away from it, but New York has done nothing at the present time. But as we continue to have more information, we'll continue to share that. The next thing is that in one of our last presentations, Mr. Snyder and I, we had talked about that money that was coming through us through those 2 grants. We're starting to get some guidance on it. We've attended, both he and I have attended a number of seminars, and there are, I will say, restrictions in terms of how you can use the money, but it really looks like that if you can give a good rationale on how it relates to COVID or the pandemic and relates to students or things that are related to the students, whether it be environmental or whether it be learning loss or whether it be any of those, that we'll be able to probably put something together. Now, what we do need to do is we need to put a plan together by July 1, that's probably the toughest part of this because they really give us much time to do that. So we're trying to figure out that. And then with that, you're also supposed to involve as many of the stakeholders as possible. So like starting this week, actually starting tomorrow, I'm having various different meetings with stakeholder groups. And then again, we'll probably do something like I've done in the past where we're sharing some of that information and doing a workshop or something for the community as well so people can understand what's going on and get some feedback and as we're going forward. So that will be something coming in the near future once we kind of get a little bit better idea of what it is that we need to be doing. So we're looking at that. Also, we have a number of students here tonight that I'd like to welcome and congratulate. Looking forward to acknowledging you. We'll do that just in a little bit. So we're looking forward to doing that. So thank you very much for coming out here tonight. And as we get closer to the end of the year, as I've said before, is Many of the guidelines continues to change on a daily basis, and we've even seen that in the last couple of days. We are getting ready for some of the end of the year activities, and we're trying to make them obviously as following all our safety protocols and procedures, but at the same time really trying to offer our students the best experience possible. So those are some of the things that we're doing. You'll start to see some notices from whether it be your principals or classroom teachers about information that will be happening. I know both the middle school and high school have sent out their notices about whether it be moving up or graduation and the prom, and we're continuing to monitor that as well. Also tonight on the agenda, you're going to see one thing. It's called an MOU. People had asked me, that's why I kind of want to pull it out. The county, Suffolk County Legislative Office is starting to ask various places or buildings or locations where they can do vaccines. But to do that, you have to have an MOU. So there is an MOU on this. This does not mean that Bayport Blue Point High School or any of the schools is automatically going to become a vaccine site, but it does allow us, if we wanted to go that way, we would do it. It would not be something necessarily just for students. That's not how it's being set up. If that's how they're going to do it, it would be something offered to the community if people wanted to come and do a vaccine. We don't know if we're going to move forward with that, but we had to have an MOU in place if we were to do that. And obviously, if anything were taken place, we would inform the community. You would have to have permission. It's not something that just could happen, because that was one of the questions that somebody had called me about today and said, are you just going to give it to people? That is obviously nothing that we will ever do. So I just wanted to put that out there. So we're just trying to do an MOU to see if it's something that we would look to do in the near future. Tonight, I also would like to just recognize two other people. I have Mr. Bortsfield is here in front of us. As you know, we've been looking for a director of facility, so he's going to be joining us here. That is on the board as well. And I know one of the conversations we've had is I sent you all the information from last meeting about the herbicides. I had Mr. Martino, so I'd like to thank Mr. Martino for coming here tonight. I really appreciate that as well. Thank you so much in case we have any questions. So thank you for that. And I think that really takes, the last thing is, the last thing that is on here is there is a resolution for the traffic study. I've been working with Mr. Cordes. I've given him all the information. They actually think they're going to have something to you within probably 2 or 3 weeks. So they'll be able to do that. And we did take Mr. Honey's recommendation of the shrubs, and that was taken care of pretty quickly. So thank you, Mr. Honey, for that, for bringing that forward to our attention. It was something that the town did own, and they came and did it pretty much right away for us. So thank you for that. And thank you for Mr. Martino, because he had helped me with that. So thank you for that. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Dr. Harney. This time we'll pass over to our student rep. Mr. Honey, how are you tonight?
Good, thank you. Just a couple things tonight. The first of which is that the Peers to Peers Club at the high school is running its annual Citizenship Week, in which students and faculty have the opportunity to sign up for various service projects in their homerooms. Next week, the Senior Class Club has organized a Senior Spirit Week at the high school, and this includes events such as Senior Sunrise Breakfast, Hawaiian Day, and more, aimed at making a very memorable end to senior year. Since after the last meeting, additional information on prom and graduation has come out. There's a lot of excitement surrounding that as well. And the class of 2021 is running a mask fundraiser for graduation day. I believe info on that's on the Twitter page. And then I just wanted to thank again for about the discussion at the last meeting on the traffic at the corner, and that the next day me and my friends saw that they were out there cutting that down. And then really just the last thing I want to say is best of luck to all student athletes as we're in the middle of the spring sports season. And I know it's a pretty exciting one with a lot of sports out there. So that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Honey. Any questions for Mr. Honey? As always, thank you so much for... Go back to Dr. Harney.
Yes, sorry, just one thing I had left off. At the next meeting, we are going to recognize those employees of ours that will be retiring or receiving tenure, or we also have a number of individual awards. Some of you may have heard that T.J. Smith recently won the Unsung Teacher of the Year Award through the PTA, where a number of us were able to actually join it virtual last week, which was very nice, so we're going to recognize him as well. And you also had heard that Mrs. Inky Brinkman was also the Librarian of the Year, so we're going to recognize her as well. So it'll be a nice opportunity for us to recognize some of our staff at our next meeting. I just wanted to give you that.
Thank you, Dr. Harney. At this time, we have some Camille winners, and we will pass it over to Dr. Fulton to present the awards.
Thank you. So again, we're continuing the past couple of meetings. We've had the honor and privilege of honoring our musicians who have been honored by SCMEA for the All County Music Festival for 2021. So we're very excited to have our next batch of musicians, and we want to congratulate you again on your accomplishment. So for chorus, we'd like to bring up Morgan Coffey. Again for chorus, Kaylee Doris. Up. Kaylee, come on up. There you go. Congratulations. For clarinet, Lily Foreman. Congratulations. For alto sax, Alexander Cavuto. For French horn, Ryan Feba. Congratulations. For violin, Sierra Elrose. Congratulations. For chorus, Mia McCormick. For chorus, JT Swan. For trombone, Brandon Mattamore. For flute, Alexander Valden. And for baritone, Jack Raymond. So we can do for our award winners that are here tonight, in a little bit, you're going to go in the back into the lobby, and we can take a nice socially distanced group picture. But congratulations again for your accomplishments. With that being said, I would like to bring up Mr. Haas for our next award.
Thank you, Dr. Fulton. I am proud this evening to honor one of our talented high school students, Miss Emily Clayton. Emily, this winter, was recognized by the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards competition through the Alliance for Young Artists and Writers for 2 pieces of poetry that she submitted. She was honored with honorable mention for To Speak with Eloquence, and then she was awarded the Gold Key for What I Know for Now. That one actually put her forward for possible national recognition as well. So I'd like to call up Emily Clayton for congratulations.
Maybe we can get Dad to step up and take a little group photo with Mr. Haas here. Emily, I know how much you want a picture with your father.
Emily, do you want to read the poem?
Emily should definitely read the poem.
Our musical winners, if you want to start making your way to the back into the lobby, we'll get a group photo. But thank you guys so much for coming. Feel free to come back. But it's also okay if you want to go home for the night as well. Thank you guys so much, and congratulations again.
Yeah, and congratulations, everybody. And And just one other person I'd like to thank tonight before she leaves is Miss Benetti. Actually, no, listen to me. Miss Benetti, I just want to thank you for all your help and all your work today with the vote and the budget process. It's our first time through this, so thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the support.
Thank you, Dr. Harney. At this time, we're going back to Dr. Harney for a pre-K presentation along with Dr. Fulton.
So tonight what we're going to do, and Dr. Fulton is going to really kind of take the lead on this. Many of you may have seen when the money came out from New York State, one of the areas that they had added this year was pre-K. And just about every district was allocated some money towards it. So automatically people thought, oh, that means you're going to do pre-K. It's not necessarily what it means because there's a lot that goes into it. But what we wanted to do is to do a presentation that we could share with people and kind of show you just some of the ins and outs. So really, this is just for informational purposes. We'll take any questions you have. We are still looking to a lot of items because there's a lot that goes along with this, but it's really just to kind of give you some background and some information. So saying that, I'm going to kind of turn it over to Dr. Fulton, who will kind of walk you through this for a little bit and kind of show you what the options are or things that would have to be considered. People automatically think because you were given the money that it's going to be self-sustaining. That is far from the truth. So we're going to kind of just walk you through a little bit.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harney. So the purpose of our presentation tonight is to kind of introduce some of the UPK regulations that are out there, review the new funding opportunity that is now available to BBP, which had not been available prior, and kind of discuss some potential UPK designs. Again, for our district goals, for anything that we do, we try to tie it into what we work on with our goals, and this has a number of different connections with learning, obviously connections and relationship within the community. So what exactly is UPK? It stands for Universal Pre-Kindergarten. Remember, Universal Pre-K has existed and there has been prior funding opportunities from the state and other areas which allow for a half-day and full-day programs. BBP traditionally has not qualified for that funding due to several economic factors, needs, resource index capacity, community wealth. So this funding opportunity is a little different because it wasn't entirely based off of those factors. It's a New York State grant that's only given to the district for the purpose of pre-K, and this funding cannot be allocated to any other program. So the funding that says designated, and we'll get to that number in a couple of slides, it can only be used for pre-K. The grant is limited, and it can only be done from a predetermined amount of students, and there's a ratio that determines that funding. Participants, if your interest, because we have a certain number of spots, if you have higher interest in the program than funding, you would actually have to participate and do a lottery to determine what students would participate. And once the spots are drawn and you filled out your program, if there's any additional spots, you would have to maintain a waiting list that would be active throughout the year that you would access as the year progresses. Program requires that you need to be taught by New York State certified teachers and qualified teacher assistants. This funding opportunity is 5 hours per day. Mentioned earlier, past universal pre-K designs, some districts have half-day and full-day programs. It's very specific with this new funding that it is for a full-day program. So if you're an existing half-day program, you can expand to full-day, but you cannot utilize this program for a half-day program. You have to make sure your program applies with all New York State regulations. The curriculum has to be next generation standard based and approved by New York State. And the class size ratio is 18 children, 1 teacher, and 1 teacher assistant. As I mentioned again, if your interest is higher than your funded slots, you would have to partake in a lottery to determine who gets those spots. So how is the money allocated? So the new full-day program that they're talking about, it's $5,400 per student. Students that attend less than 180 days a year, you reduce the allocation for each day that they're not in attendance. They have allowed, if we determine, let's say, as a district, if a district says they can't get the program up and running by September, you could choose a mid-year start date to buy you time, but your funding is then adjusted accordingly. So you will not get your full allotment. We were awarded $237,600. That's at the $5,400 rate. That is 44 students. This rate has not been adjusted in many years by New York State. So it's $2,700 for half day, $5,400 for full day, and it has not been adjusted, and there are lobbying efforts from various entities that are trying to have that rate adjusted to be able to help and try to provide additional funding. So student selection. Children must be eligible to attend kindergarten the following year. This money is very specific. District must be a child for 4 years old. Again, we talked about that lottery. We have 44 spots that would be funded. If 45 families express interest, you would have to conduct a lottery. Additional children may attend the program if space permits, and that would be through tuition, again, charging that $5,400 rate for a full day. So if you remember, tie it back. 18 students per section, 44 students were being funded. You can't run a half section, so you would have to, in essence, run a third section, which means you would have 10 spots that potentially could be tuition students. And the other thing is that children eligible to attend kindergarten, because when parents decide to enroll their students, if they're of kindergarten age, they cannot participate in a pre-K program. So the curriculum has to be next generation standards. Curriculum has to be focused on cognitive, social, and emotional learning and utilize developmentally appropriate practices for 4 years old. Big emphasis is learning via purposeful play. There needs to be individual, small, and large group instruction, and it needs to also have teacher and child guided instruction. The best way, as parents have been calling me, I explain that, is you're really not only exposing the child to curriculum, but you're beginning to integrate them into what a school day would be in a traditional school classroom. So that's where the individual, small, and group instruction, some independent guided practice for the child, and really prepare them to be successful in kindergarten. Parent requirements are proof of residency, proof of immunizations, and updated physicals. The child must not turn 4 no later than December 1st or the date utilized by the district as a cutoff. So for us, traditionally what I've called and what other districts do is you would use your kindergarten registration date, that month and that date, as something similar. The other thing is that the parents must provide transportation to the program. The funding that we're being allocated, again, is used for the students, and it cannot be used for transportation. So again, we got $237,600 for a full day program. That's 5 hours per day for 44 students. Children must be 4 years old by December 1st. And this is different from past universal pre-K grant opportunities. Again, the full day requirement. This is something in years past, you had an option of a half day. For this $237,600, it must be a full day program. And in the past, and the reason BBP has not qualified in the past, is needs resource capacity, free reduced lunch percentage, district wealth. There were a number of different factors. So for this money, it's really designed and geared towards something that's different from the prior universal pre-K opportunities. So there are some different models that you could look to incorporate a program. One is a fully district-run program. That is, you're using district teachers, district space, district personnel, funded fully within the money and with the additional money by the district. You have a community-based example, which is known as a CBO in the universal pre-K, and that's where you get an organization like Scope, St. Joseph's, YMCA, or it could be a local existing Bayport Blue Point community provider. We do have providers, pre-K providers within the district. What will happen is the district actually has to do an RFP. If we would use a community-based program to run the program, we would put out a request for a proposal, and then everybody would then have the opportunity to respond to the proposal and put in that they would be interested in being our community-based partner. Depending on what you're looking for with what those arrangements would be, that's something that would be an internal district conversation and discussion. Some of the things you would have to determine is spacing. Where would the program be housed? Would it be on school district grounds? Would it be housed in another facility, another area would be an example. Another example is a hybrid district CBO model, and this is something that like the Bayshore School District does, is where they house certain sections of classes on school district property, and then other classes are housed at a YMCA facility. So that would be an example of a hybrid model. So there's a couple of different models that you can take a look at. A district-based model, this is all BBP. We would provide the classroom space. We hire the staff, we pay the staff, we evaluate the staff, we train the staff, we supervise the staff. We provide the curriculum, we provide the instructional materials, age-appropriate classroom furniture, nursing services for the children while they're in. The students would need to be eligible for our lunch program. And then again, we come back to that eligibility lottery if our interest exceeds the 44 spots that we're funded for. The $237,600 is not enough funding to fully pay for a program. No matter what model we choose, there is going to be additional expense if we choose to pursue universal pre-K. Now, a CBO provider, so again, community-based organization, back to that acronym, we could actually do a model where the CBO provides the services, but it's hosted here on Bayport Blue Point School District grounds. We provide the classroom space. We provide the furniture, the nursing services, and a lunch program. We still need to conduct the lottery if interest exceeds the 44 slots that we're funded for, and we can allow the pre-K staff to participate in training and staff meetings. But here's the difference. If you use a CBO model, the community-based organization actually hires and pays the staff. So if you were to use Scope, St. Joseph's, YMCA, or a local provider, and that is our CBO, technically the pre-K teachers are their employees, not ours. They train and supervise the staff, they evaluate the staff, they provide the curriculum and instructional materials. Again, we have to provide lunch, but they would provide snack and beverages for the day. Important notes to remember, allocation rates cannot be changed, and they have not been updated in a while. It's $5,400 per student. We have enough from the funding that they provided for 44 students. And then any additional students, because again, we talked about that 18 class size ratio, we would need, you can't have a half section. So at a minimum, we would need at least 3 sections, which would open up, in theory, a minimum of 10 tuition spots. You also could decide you want to run more sections, but that would be obviously part of discussions. I'm ahead of myself. The rate has not changed in several years. The district has to incur all additional costs. Again, the money that's being allocated for us will not entirely fund the program. And that is something that, so that as this decision and discussion are ongoing, recognize and realize that there will be additional expense to the district taking on a UPK program. We do not know how long this funding is available. There is no guarantee to that. And that is something to be able to stress. So even though we're getting $37,600 this year, does not mean that that funding is continued. So when you make that commitment to take on the additional expense, you'll also have to be prepared to be able to take on the whole expense. And that's something to be able to think about. And the other thing is that we can develop a plan where a CBO, depending on the RFP and who answers our proposals, where the district and the community-based organization could share hosting duties due to space or classroom needs. Because that is something that impacts BBP. We have 3 elementary schools. Does not mean that we have, throw a hypothetical number out there, oh, we can do 8 sections of universal pre-K. We might not necessarily have the space for that. So these are all things to be able to think about and how to be able to organize. So this is just a very broad overview. Wanted to provide you some information, answer some questions about the funding and what some of those structures could look like, so that way it could inform our discussions and our deliberations. So, questions?
Thank you, Dr. Fulton. Any trustee questions? We got Mr. Johnson, I think, down there.
Yeah, so Dr. Fulton, any look into, so I was kind of wondering that same, that you answered at the end, but like why they would provide funding for 44 students when the class size is 18. The numbers didn't really work out too well, but let's assume that we did 3 sections, 54 students. We offered that up. Any idea of what the funding would be above and beyond if we did it locally?
That would, we would have to take a look and be able to see, because the variables that we'd have to determine, where is the program going to be housed? We're going to house it here in Bayport Blue Point, or is it going to, or we're going to do a CBO model where it's housed, maybe perhaps at a CBO location. So a lot of those things would have to be determined. Furniture, teaching materials, these are all things that would have to necessarily be priced out. And so I don't have a specific number for you, but it would be an investment.
And from our understanding is if you're talking about 54 students, Mr. Johnson, those 10
Yeah.
would be paying a tuition.
I just don't see how you leave
Right,
the free funding and you only have two sections.
correct. So
If
that's
the-
why, the way
if
they
the demand's
suggested,
there.
and that's why, and you heard Dr. Fulton talked about it, is so the first 44 would get a spot, right? Then the next 10, if they wanted to come, they'd be paying that tuition up, and I believe it's that same
It's
5,400.
the same rate, so that might not be enough to
So-
make the difference for a
We could
self-sustaining
subsidize it
program.
as a district.
Or you could subsidize it as a district. You could do that, okay? But that's it. So that's your choice with those 10. Either they're going to pay it, but the state is not giving you any additional money for those extra 10.
So I guess my only takeaway from this is I personally me would like to see some scenarios, maybe some courses of action involving the different scenarios, what the cost would be above and beyond the 240,000 or 30-something thousand. And I wouldn't mind a polling of some parents in the community to see whether or not they would like this, because if the demand's there, I know we could spend money on a lot worse things. I mean, this is the type of stuff that you want to be able to provide to the taxpayers and to the community, universal pre-K, especially when some of it's being paid for.
It's one of the reasons why we just wanted to bring the information. Everyone saw that line, that was part of the funding for the state aid. And so we've been getting questions. That's why we said, you know what, let's kind of brush off what Dr. Fulton was doing a couple of years ago when we didn't meet the qualifications for the universal pre-K at that time, but now we do. The biggest question is, remember though, is if we build it, the funding might be there for a year, 2, 5, we don't know. We'd have to be able to fund it afterwards. But we said that we would look into various, options.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Ms. Byrne?
So roughly, and typically a year we've been around 130, 135. So we're still in that area where I think Mr. Honey's class is graduating 186 thereabouts, right? Thereabouts. And what's that? 189. And we're bringing in students around, like this year's is 134, I think it is. So, and that's been about the constant, minus the one grade that we have in 5th grade right now, which is 118, 120.
And our current registration, your numbers really don't begin to fill out till the summer. We have kindergarten students that are registered for kindergarten for next year, but that process continues throughout the summer until we finally get to
Right now,
what
it
our
looks like
total
we
size.
have 2 sections at Blue Point for next year. It looks like 3 at Academy, and right now, but it'll change because it's early, is 2 at Sylvan, but that will probably move to 3. That's what we're anticipating.
Well, that's
No, it's-
where it comes down to.
It's a lottery.
If it turns out that you have a higher express interest than 44, it must be a lottery. And it can't be first come,
Yeah,
first
there are
served.
many districts that would actually do it virtual or live. They bring the people in and just so that to show that it's totally on the up and up. And it's like, okay, Mrs. Byrne, and that's how it's done.
No. Now, and based on my conversations with colleagues across Long Island, that target population that you're referencing, sometimes they don't even participate in the lottery for a number of different reasons. So it makes it even more difficult to target if there's a language issue or even knowledge and awareness. I mean, obviously we would do our best as a district to promote awareness of the program, but that targeted community that you're talking about sometimes for various reasons that they don't participate, which even limits their access even further. Or, I mean, I haven't thought of what a lottery would actually look like, but it would be some sort of random selection.
Yeah, we would, on all honesty, we would probably do it in public and give everyone the opportunity to see exactly how we do it.
So it would be, if 50 people are interested, it goes to a lottery, and after the lottery is set, then people would have tuition in.
Yeah, they'd have two choices. They'd have two choices. Say, you know what, I'm going to sit on the waiting list and see if somebody decides not to take a spot, and it's done. And that's it. Even when you're doing the lottery, you get your 44, and then it's like, okay, Mrs. Byrne is 45, Mr. Siri is 46, and then that's how it's done. And then you would decide on your own, I'll wait and hold off, or, you know what, I'm going to tuition in, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Siri. Thank you, Ms. Byrne. Mr. Brodsky?
So just a couple questions. Similar to Mr. Johnson, I think if we could get a breakdown of the two models that you talked about the district run and what the assumed cost would be for that, and then what our portion of the community-based group, the cost for us to the district would be, and how much room we have left then to go out to bid for the services that are provided by the community provider.
Well, there wouldn't be anything left. That $237,000 goes towards either the community-based organization or for the slots. So all that money is student applied. So we'd be getting you the difference between what would the district expense be.
Got it. Okay.
And part of that is projections, because again, we have to put a request for proposal out
Right.
there, so we actually have to see what the community-based organizations would actually submit if we were to choose a CBO model.
Right. I'm just trying to figure out what the burden would be under those two models for what the difference is that we would have to make up. I
Yeah,
guess.
we could give you something rough without doing the official RFPs, which
Yeah,
I wouldn't
right.
do yet. Then certain assumptions we could try to make, and then
Right.
we can kind of put something like that
Yeah,
together.
just
for you.
to get a
And
ballpark.
I have been in contact with some CBOs to get rough estimates of what the cost would look like.
All right. And I know that you were mentioning space within the three elementary schools. Is there the potential to use the current, soon-to-be former library facility as space options for
I know.
this?
It's a good question. Two things is, one is, in speaking to Mr. Farson, we talked about this a couple of years ago, there would have to be a number of, I'll call it safety upgrades to that place to house children on a regular basis, so that would have to happen, so there'd probably be a cost there. Two, as we know, is they're in the process of seeing if there are any takers out there for that piece. Other than that, it would be us taking the building under our, keeping it for ourselves.
Right. I'm just, if we're tight on space, I thought maybe that would be a potential.
It's interesting, this is also something, as we talk about it, right, could be kind of worked in with the enrollment pieces we've been talking, because we've said that we're going to revisit that. We've would come back in the fall and try to give some ideas. Because as our enrollment stops, it might be also an opportunity to use even some of our own staff that we currently have, right, which would be a nice opportunity too. So
Yeah. And
there's a couple of options, and that's why we are not proposing anything for September. We would not be ready for that. So, but that's why we kind of want to bring this forward tonight to get some ideas.
Right, and one of the things, as Dr. Harney just mentioned, and I made sure that I confirmed this with the state too as well, if we choose a mid-year point, we can start the program at mid-year, but just remember that $237,600 then would be, what we're allocated would be adjusted proportionally for only having a half-year program.
Yeah, I don't think we would try to do that to you guys. Honestly, I mean, I'm glad that we're having the conversation, but there's obviously a lot of planning and discussion that needs to go on further with this. Dr. Herney, I know one of the things that we had potentially talked about with reorganization of the buildings was evaluating whether inclusion at Blue Point was, the best we could do, just because it's our smallest building. Would that be a potential to look at, as moving inclusion and then possibly having space then in Blue Point for this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, one of the things that when we started our conversations again with the demographer about a month ago, one of the things we had talked about was if we were to move the co-teaching model from Blue Point, and then the only reason is because it was the smaller school, right? To a school where you had more sections, right? That would free up space at Blue Point Elementary. And the number is probably, and I can honestly probably, it's more than 44.
Right.
So, and again, it would all play on how it, where they fell, you know, in terms of that, but you might be able to get some space there. We can make that part of our kind of research.
Yeah, that would be great.
And the one thing to note, when the enrollment committee looked at potential configurations, and when I did my initial research on the pre-K program, is we did not qualify for that funding, that additional funding that was made available at that time.
Right. Yeah, I think this is absolutely something worth exploring. I mean, you know, my daughter's a little bit older now, but I know if I was freshly married and looking to start a family and looking for somewhere to go, I mean, having a UPK program would certainly be attractive. And ultimately that may help at least a little bit with the enrollment issue, is if we can attract, you know, younger families here. So I thank you, Dr. Fulton, for pulling this together. It's definitely something worth exploring, I think.
Mr. Johnson?
I just had a follow-up question. So the instructors could be just regular elementary certified instructors?
Well, again, it depends on the model that you have. If you use a fully district-run program, they would be Bayport Blue Point employees. If you use a CBO model, they are New York State certified teachers, elementary teachers, yes.
No, there's a certification for pre-K.
Universal for pre-K.
The certifications vary from grades
Right.
1 to 6 or pre-K to whatever, so they'd have to have a pre-K certification, which honestly a lot of elementary teachers do have.
Because I do realize that,
And also certificated certified teacher assistant as well, because it's a teacher and teacher assistant in the classroom.
because it seems like, Tim, every year when we get, when you do your organizing the classrooms at the elementary school, having 3 elementary schools, I know the biggest challenge you have is this class is 2, this one's 2, this one's 3, and the next year this one's 3, and you don't really have the ability for faculty to smooth. This might add a little more flexibility to your tools to be able to say, okay, well, I have 3 additional teachers and a little more. I'm not sure if that's something.
I mean, that's why this is much bigger than a one-night conversation, right? Is because there's so many moving parts to it. And you're absolutely right. One of the things we've always talked about is, you know, where the break in numbers is always plays into the sections, and they don't always even out. So you always get, well, why is it this way in this place, and why is it this way and that? So a lot of it has to do with the way the numbers fall. So that's why I said this would be a much bigger discussion, you know.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Siri?
Wouldn't you need, and thank you again for the presentation, Dr. Fulton, wouldn't you need some type of either part-time administrator to oversee this program? These are, anyone I've ever participated in, you know, sent my kids to, there is a full-time.
Well, based on the model, if it was a fully district-run model, the administrator would have to be a BBP employee. If you use the CPO model, technically the community-based organization is the administrator, and they work in collaboration and conjunction with the district, because obviously the teachers would be in our buildings. We would still want them to participate in staff development and be part of the building too as well. But technically, the supervisors of the program would be the CBO.
And there's the only question I have, and just cynical, I guess, where does the liability lie if it's a CBO or a hybrid model? Like if something, you know, awful happens, an accident, is the district or the provider?
You can probably look at that as a joint liability. You know, we have the building, we have the facility, we're going to get sued as a target for any kind of litigation under any of those circumstances, but obviously the carrier, the provider would have their own insurance as well, and the insurance companies would have to deal with the subrogation of that claim depending on the nature of it. But certainly anything that we host in our facilities, our insurance, and we would make sure that it's not disclaimed before we had, you know, the outside agency coming in. We'd just make sure that we articulate that to our carrier so that we know that that's a covered relationship. But obviously we would seek to have them be appropriately insured as well, so we're doubly covered.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siri. Mr. Johnson?
I just see this as like, you know, I don't want to overcomplicate this with administrators insurance. I see this as simply an influx of 50 more students across all grades. I look at it from that type of standard. I realize it's a different program, but from an insurance standpoint, from an administration standpoint, it's really 3 classes, extra furniture. That's how I see it. I just see it as an influx of 54 potential students at the elementary school level, just in a separate grade. So I like the idea. Obviously, it comes a lot down to costs, but I like the idea of us housing it within our district. I trust the employees of the district, and I think it would be a great program for us to take on, especially if it's subsidized.
No,
Thank
you asked the question? Okay.
thank you, Mr. Johnson. Just wanted you to know there was one community member's question, but Mr. Brodsky asked that exact same question in regards to the library. So I guess just if I'm going to kind of finish this off, what we heard from the board was we'd like to have a little more information on both options and some guidance from you guys going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Dr. Fulton for putting this together for us. As I said, this is really was just to give you guys some information. Obviously, if we were to go forward, we would love to be able to house this, but there is obviously ourselves that we would love to do. As you were saying, Mr. Johnson, I mean, that would be ideal if we could pull that off. So,
Thank you, Dr. Harney.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fulton. Appreciate looking into that. Moving on to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve consent agenda items F, G, H, I, J, K, and L? Mr. Siri, second by Mr. Krug. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. Moving on to the regular agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the turf maintenance and the use of herbicides? Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Borowski, second. Here's a second. Mr. Krug, discussion. Any discussion items for the, Mr. Borowski?
So I know I had raised several issues about this as it was posted to the agenda last time. And just want to thank Dr. Herney for providing the information he did as to the causation and the necessity for the use of the herbicides. My understanding is that, because our condensed sports schedule, essentially that led to greater than average wear in the turf and therefore establishment of weeds, which, doesn't sound like a big deal, but obviously it's something that degrades the quality of the turf and can potentially lead to, athlete injuries, which is something we would want to avoid. That being said, I do want to just go on record and say that I'm hopeful that we can look at this from a preventative standpoint when we move more towards, I guess, what I'll call normal operations, is that this isn't a resolution that we see on the agenda every year, and that, whether it's additional overseeding or aeration or whatever, if we need to invest a little bit more in turf care to avoid the use of herbicides, and, I recognize that these are all DEC approved products that we're using, but, there were a lot of things that were formally approved by the DEC that are no longer from 20 years ago. And, it's not just a matter of our athletes and our kids, but a matter of the staff that apply this stuff as well. So, and, the areas immediately surrounding the fields. So I would just like to say that, if we can do something with buildings and grounds to develop a robust plan to combat this, where it's only a, once every handful of years thing, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Borowski. Any other discussion?
can I make a comment? Yeah, I would like to thank you, Mr. Borowski, and I don't want to speak out of turn. And Mr. Martino, if I say anything wrong, please just let me know. One of the goals was, and you kind of alluded to it, is with the fields being so new, right? Both the areas that we're talking about are brand new fields. And we had done all the proper care early on, but then obviously with the condensing of the seasons, so they have taken a beating, and we would like to, and we want to continue to. The goal is really now to do this, and then we would aerate again, overseed again, and go forward with that process in the hopes that this is not a yearly thing. That is not what we're looking forward to, and we would, continue to just really do the upkeep of the grass on a regular basis. Am I correct, Mr. Martino, in saying that?
That's perfect. I appreciate it. Yeah, I recognize that, much like everything with COVID, this is a, a unique situation, especially with having the fields just being redone. And obviously we don't want to waste the effort and time that went into that. So again, I appreciate the information. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Borowski. Any further discussion, Ms. Byrne?
Oh, I guess I want to be sensible here, and I'll go with Jason, but I really hope this doesn't come up again. I hope that this works, and we don't hear about weeds for many decades.
Thank you, Ms. Byrne. Any other discussion?
Just on a side note too, if you've had the opportunity to get out to the fields, either out here, where our guys did a ton of work for the baseball field and the softball field, I know I have received a number of compliments on that, just how they leveled the field. So they're trying to take care of it. Obviously, the middle school field was part of the bond, but this was not, and that's something we agreed to last year. So I'd just like to thank all of them for everything that they've done to try to really kind of, if you remember, this was something that came to us from the community last year that we addressed. So I'd like to thank you guys and all your hard work. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harney, and thank you, Mr. Martino, for coming tonight. We truly appreciate it. We appreciate everything you've been doing. So thank you so much. Any other discussion from trustees? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. Moving on to the next agenda item, can I have a motion to approve the Code of Conduct 2021-2022 first reading? Mr. Borowski, second. I think that was Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. Can I have a motion to approve the joint representation disclosure and consent agreement engagement letter? Mr. Borowski, second. Mr. Siri, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries 6-0. Can I have a motion to approve the following chief inspectors of election at a rate of $16 an hour? Mr. Borowski, second. Mr. Krug, any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. Can I have a motion to approve Suffolk County setting up various sites throughout the county to administer the COVID-19 vaccines in our school district? Mr. Siri, second. Mr. Krug, any discussion? Mrs. Byrne?
Anytime we open the district to the public, we want to make sure if we do this that it's secure the way that we secure things, I assume, for the election as well. So that's just another thing of opening up the school to any random person.
Yeah, absolutely. And in all honesty, I don't even know if it would have to be during a time when the students were here. We might be able to do it on a Saturday or something. I don't know that if we were to even to choose to do this, but and we haven't even selected a building. We're nowhere near, but we would absolutely do that.
Are they reaching out to places like fire departments?
Good question. It's actually something that I have reached, or I'm planning on reaching out to our own to see if they have. That I don't know off the top of my head.
That would be more appropriate.
Thank you, Ms. Byrne. Any other discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. At this time, we open up to community new business. Mr. Roop? Thank you, Mr. Roop. We appreciate it. Any other community new business? Not hearing any, turn it over to trustee new business. Not, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I got just one thing. I just kind of popped in my head now. I know as we get past this, election and closer to reorganization, I just want to examine maybe taking an earlier snapshot of, the school calendar for not the upcoming year, but the year prior. Like, 'cause I know we kind of looked at this. I just want to check the calendar to see if there's be anything like this next year that's going to pop up. Like, we're starting school a week early, and I understand there was some things that we couldn't avoid, but I definitely want to have that discussion earlier in the future, because I do think we should reach out to the community when we have a situation where we're starting school work and school a week before, Labor Day. I just think that a lot of people make plans, and now it's February and we're voting on it, and it's like you can't undo those vacation plans.
So the one challenge is we typically can't do our calendar until after BOCES does theirs, or at least we get a draft of that. So, for example, this year we actually did it almost immediately after having theirs. I could try to do it earlier, but if BOCES changes it, it will change. So if you want me to bring it forward earlier, I can. I just never know because we try to line up with them because obviously a number of our kids go there. So,
And this is, it's more just my opinion. Like, nobody wants to start school before Labor Day. I mean, I'd move to Florida if I wanted to do that, but that's Brian Johnson.
yeah, it has a lot to do where some of the holidays fell this year. For example, this year you'll have Labor Day, and now the students are also off Tuesday and Wednesday. And then a week later they have another day off, and that became the challenge for this year because we have to meet our hours and the days and all that piece. That's where it became.
I'm just hoping that we can identify if this. I'm hoping this won't be like habitual. I'm just hoping that we can identify these challenges early. Because once again, what's good for me is not good for everybody. But I would like to know whether or not the families in the district, whether or not this works for them or not. Because if it doesn't, then it's something the earlier we know, we could figure out some type of alternative plan or figure out something that works best for the majority.
Okay.
So that's my only ask. I realize that the voice of the few shouldn't dictate all, but I do definitely want to get when we start looking at a major change in the calendar. Like I don't think we've ever had this where we start this early.
We've never gone, at least in my time here, we've never gone a full week in advance. That we have not done. We've done 2 days, I think, at the most we've done before. A lot of it, again, it just was a lot of the due to the holidays. That's really what came into this. So I know we were able to get this done in February. If I can do it earlier, I'll definitely get it done earlier, though.
Yeah, just
Okay.
like I said, just identify the issue up front and see if we can work around it.
That's fine.
Thank you, Dr. Harney. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any other trustee in new business? Mr. Siri?
Just something quickly. Has there been any talk, since the quarantine rules have changed so drastically, has there been any talk before the school year ends of allowing the elementary, the little kids, to leave their laptops possibly at home instead of carrying them every day? Backpacks. And I know I've heard this before, from other people, and I've said it. Transporting those things every day, not only is it, heavy on those little guys and girls' backs, but it can get, they drop them, they break them. I know the school year is almost over, and it's really low on the list. But
I actually have a meeting set up for tomorrow
all right.
to talk a number of items, but it's with all the principals. So
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Siri. I just want to thank everybody who voted today and remind everyone that the polls are still open to 9. And we appreciate everyone voting. I also want to congratulate you, sir, and welcome to the team. We appreciate it. Welcome aboard. And thank you guys so much. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Siri, second by Mr. Krug. All in favor? Thank you guys so much. Dr.
thank you
Harney
guys
will...
up there as well. Thank you, Ms. Kiefer. Thanks, Ms. Frey up there. Pam, thank you very much.
Just so everyone at home is aware, we will be able to post the results sometime around 9:30, 9:45 to the district website as soon as we know.
Correct.
Thank you guys so much.